This week on the bonus round, we're in Las Vegas at the 2015 DICE Summit. I'm joined by Gearbox Software's Randy Pitchford, Alex Rogopoulos from Harmonix, and the director of USC Games, Tracy Fullerton. Hey, welcome back to the bonus round here on GameTrailers. I am here at DICE in Las Vegas with Tracy, Randy, and Alex for our final segment. And this week we are going to talk about something that is so big we even had a category at the Game Awards last year, which is the idea of remaking or remastering games. And as Alex and I were talking in the break, it's the definition of that is important to define. And I think sometimes a remake is sort of putting extra creative energy in and sort of doing something new and different, whereas a remaster is literally taking a game and sometimes up-resing it or putting it on a new platform. But we've seen this trend, I think, increasing over the past few years. I don't know if it's something that's going to, the remasters at least, if that's something that's going to continue, or it was just sort of one of these transitional things because the old console games you couldn't play on the new ones and whatnot. But Randy, maybe we'll start with you, since you have two games that would fall in this category coming out over the next few months, with Homeworld, which was a great game from Relic back in the day. I remember covering that in the, what was it, the 90s, right? Late 90s.
98, 99.
You guys are bringing that back, and also Borderlands. You're doing a new collection that'll be out on the next gen boxes, which remasters that. What is the appeal to you of bringing some of those games back? Because so one of the things that's interesting about our industry is sometimes some games translate really well, many years later to still being played, and some of them are just, the interface or the sort of mechanics are so sort of, almost feel so broken. And I even look back at, I played Uncharted 1, I don't know, a couple months ago, and it's like, it's hard to play. Yeah. Because the mechanics have advanced so much. Yeah. So
I think it's different depending on which game you're talking about. In the case of Borderlands, we launched Borderlands, the pre-sequel, after the new generation of consoles appeared, and we started developing it exclusively for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 and Windows PC. And it turned out that the transition happened really quickly. A lot of people bought onto the new platforms really quickly, and there was just an upswell of customer demand. So we were very busy, but fortunately some great folks at Armature and at Iron Galaxy agreed to help us port Borderlands, the pre-sequel, to the next generation platforms.
Port's such a nasty word, though, right?
And they did a great job. I mean, to play it in 60 frames per second in full high definition, to have the ability to have 4-player split screen instead of just 2-player split screen. Like, there's some massive advantages that we get with the extra horsepower. But when they did that effort, it turned out to be, I don't want to say trivial, but not quite a bridge too far to go ahead and do Borderlands 2 as well, since they ran on the same engine, and now we have this collection. And that was really just satiating customer demand, and also to just create these, make sure these great games can exist in their best possible form, and as a library item, for the new generation. With Homeworld, I think it's just pure insanity. I think a number of us at the studio just love the franchise, and it just pained us to think that there's all these great games that we love that you just can't play on modern systems.
That's the
and they become obsolete.
Bummer about our industry. It's like there's so many great games you would love to just call up and just play, and it's so hard to find them, or you can't.
Or they don't run.
Exactly.
They just won't function on the new platform. So, so we bought that, and we just went nuts, just completely redid everything and got the band back together from the original team. And that was just a labor of love. I have no idea if it will make business sense. It probably won't. But it's, sometimes when you have some extra money to spend, sometimes you spend it on things just because you like it, right? And sometimes we do things just for the experience of doing it. So that's kind of what Homeworld is. Wow. And hopefully the other people that care about that franchise as much as we do will show up and enjoy it like we do. But I think there's lots of different reasons why this happens. Sometimes commercial, sometimes totally just passion driven. Borderlands was absolutely a commercial decision. There's just so much demand, and the suits wanted to take advantage of that. So who are we to get in the way of progress there? But anyway.
Well, and Alex, you found the community in many ways voted for Amplitude and said that they wanted you guys to sort of remake that or bring that back, right?
Yeah, so we did a Kickstarter last spring for Amplitude and really had no idea how it was going to turn out. And in fact, for the up until the 11th hour, it didn't seem like we were going to make it, but there was this kind of surge of passionate fans at the very end who brought us over the finish line. So we're hard at work building that right now. We're really psyched.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And what's cool about that is you get to know, because you have Kickstarter is like this kind of way where you can be sure there's already a customer there.
Well, it's actually quite a small but a very passionate audience that we reached with the original title back in 2003, and a big part of there were dual motivations for doing this. One was just a creative motivation. That the studio, we have 12 years of experience as a studio. We're better game developers now than we were back then. We think we can creatively make a better realization of the game and take advantage of new technology to make a more beautiful version of the game and sort of make the best version of that game in a way that was not possible 12 years ago. But the flip, there's another major factor, which is that game never found its commercial audience 12 years ago. It was not a commercial success. And the people who played it, the small number of people who played it, loved it. It was fiendishly addictive and had a very passionate core, but it was an impossibly difficult game to market. The world was very different in 2003 for game makers. You had to sell it through retail, so you had to price it at $50. And Amplitude is a game that's very strange and innovative, so it's hard to explain to people. It's not hard to play, but it's really hard to explain what it is to people. There were no free trials, no free demo downloads at the time. There was no social media, so the people who loved it had no efficient way to tell like hundreds of their friends about it. You had to price it at a high price point, so none of the there was no opportunity for like low, easy access pricing, and so there were all these barriers that made it basically impossible for a game like that to find an audience back in 2003. But all of those things have changed now, and so now we're hopeful that with free trial and social media and lower price points, that game, which, again, people who played it really loved it, hopefully we'll find an audience this time around.
That's so awesome. Yeah. And that's a remake. That's like you're reimagining.
Yes, I mean, a lot of the core we're preserving, but we're bringing a lot of creative energy to bear to making a version that we would love to have been able to make back.
That sounds awesome.
And games like that and homeworld, are games, I certainly grew up and loved both of those in particular, and it sort of pains me that people who are just starting to play games now, don't have that sense of history. I'm going to ask you about this, Tracy, because you're talking about games. I mean, is it difficult that a lot of these things that these experiences that you want to share with students? I mean, it's very hard for them to say, hey, you go play Crash Bandicoot. It's like, well, how do I do that?
Sure.
And it's like it's very difficult to be able to just look at the history of this industry.
It is. I mean, these consoles, they disappear. I mean, we have actually a pretty healthy collection of old consoles, but every once in a while they break, and then it's not like you can just go to the store and get a new one, right? You got to go search it out at some flea market or something, right? Yeah. And so the kids we teach have actually a healthy respect. And they've seen, they've used emulators, or they've, got the found a way to play a lot of the older games. But, as with all things, the knowledge base starts to fade away, and it's only the high hitters that they remember, right? And that is a real shame. It is funny though, because one group that came out of USC, the Odd Gentlemen, they're now doing the remake of King's Quest.
That's right. Yep.
And I know they had played the hell out of those games, before. So they're just the perfect choice to take this. Matt Corba, who's the creative director, just has such a love of the story, and I think he's gonna make really a great reboot of that series.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think what's interesting about that is you take the old adventure game Maxim, and there's certainly people, as we've seen on Kickstarter, that want the old 2D adventure games, like Ron Gilbert has that new one, Thumbleweed, I think it is, or Thumble
Look
Park,
what Telltale's doing. Those guys are killing it right now.
Yep.
And I mean, they just started with redoing Sam & Max, right? A remake of Sam & Max, right? But another approach to preserving our history, in addition to bringing the games forward, is to actually preserve our history. And there's actually an interesting movement where museums are starting to pop up.
Absolutely.
My wife invested a lot in bringing the National Video Game Museum to Texas, near where my new headquarters is going to be, and that's going to open this summer, and I can't. It's going to be awesome. Like, you can go to an actual place and like see all the games from the past.
It's a really important effort.
It is, and more people are caring about that. and it makes sense, right? The gamers that grew up playing, the classics, I guess, are adults now, and they want to see this stuff preserved, and they want to share it with the younger generation.
I have my own, just a side note, I have my own personal Pong machine, the original black and white Pong machine from Sears.
Wow.
And I met Nolan and I had him sign it.
You should get Al Acorn to sign it too, because he actually did the engineering.
That would be
he actually
fantastic.
made that.
Yeah,
so
I would love that.
Al Acorn designed the circuit board and did all
That's
the...
never going anywhere.
Yeah. I can probably put you in touch with him.
That would be great.
I have one signed by Al.
It's peanut butter and chocolate.
That's right. You think of like the arcades and how inaccessible that was to have arcade games that if you want to play those, and it's like all these old consoles. You're right, you can get them, but it's like there's and there's Steam is great that you can have lots of games from past history. But if you want to go back and even play Homeworld,
and
very hard to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Our predecessors, the founders of our industry, many of them are still alive. Like many of them are still young and alive. I mean, we are starting to lose people. We lost Ralph Baer this year, or I guess last year.
Yep.
But they're still around, and they have so much to teach us.
Museum. I don't know if you guys know the Strong
absolutely,
Museum.
in New York,
they have
Rochester.
Some tremendous collections there.
It's like the Museum of Play, and they have a section
Right.
that's in video games, but they also have a lot of dollhouses and all kinds of cool stuff.
They've curated things like I went and I saw all of Sid Meier's notebooks.
wow.
He took notes on every game he ever played. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's cool.
When you're thinking of things like remakes and something like Homeworld or Amplitude, I mean, how much has sort of game design or game development advanced that when you sort of look at those old versions? I mean, do they feel broken? I mean, did you have to sort of really sort of change the way they're played, or because some games I was mentioning like combat games, it's like they were jankier. They just there were certain tropes that we sort of take for granted now, and it may be a little bit different in sort of something like a Homeworld.
Our memory can be kind.
Yes.
Our memory can be very kind, and what's interesting is you have to overcome that memory. When we show people that played and loved Homeworld, when we show them the remastered version of Homeworld, even if we show it on a 4K display because we're supporting full 4K, they go, "Wow, it's beautiful, but this is what I remember."
Yeah.
And it's only when we showed them what it looked like
Before and after.
back in 1998 and 99 that they go, "Oh my God!" Because the mind's eye can do such amazing things. It's got to be difficult. I can't imagine what that's like actually remaking, not just putting a fresh coat of paint on it, but actually rebuilding.
Yeah, well, in the case of Amplitude, fortunately, the core game mechanics and game feel itself are still rock solid, and that doesn't really need to be tampered with, but there's all the other stuff around it.
Yeah.
I mean, the difficulty curve and how we approach onboarding, some of these things, when you look at them now, a dozen years later. No, it's not going to be an RPG. The core game is still the same, but a big part of what it traded on was sort of hypnotic visuals, and it was, that's obviously a clear case where
awesome.
on 8th gen consoles you can go to places that you just couldn't.
Dude, especially with all the experience you had with the Fantasia game, like you guys are getting really good at effects. So
we're gonna have a good time with this.
Oh man,
max out the visualizations. Well, it's cool. I mean, it's great to see that old classics can come back, and then there'll be some new classics hopefully unveiled here, or at least talked about at DICE. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the bonus round. Thanks to Alex, Randy, and Tracy for joining us, and we will see you next time.